All right, this is lecture 12. This is the last lecture in the first section of the class. So the first exam is going to cover everything in these first 12 set of lectures. So this is lecture 12, and what we're talking about here is the world situation. What countries are of particular concern to the United States? So what I've done is I have a little map here, and I'll refer to this map to help us understand where things are, what things are going on, that sort of stuff. Basically, the United States is the number one economic power and the number one military power in the world. It is challenged militarily by Russia, and it is challenged economically and militarily by China. So, even though we are number one, that is not a place of complacency. Other countries would like to be where we are. And in the end, the question for us is how do we respond to that challenge? Do we let them be number one? Do we say we're happy being number two? What exactly do we do? So let me just go through a couple things. Let's first look at Russia. Russia, of course, the largest country in terms of land mass. Its population, however, is getting older, just like we have a social security problem. They have a social security problem too. They also have a very serious issue. When the Soviet Union fell apart in 1989, the average age of death for a Russian male was 59, and the number one cause of death was cirrhosis of the liver, alcoholism. They were drinking themselves to death. Vladimir Putin came over and said, I want to restore Russia to its prior glory. He succeeded in raising the age of death to someplace in the 60s, and he's also really cracked down on drinking. So it is no longer the number one cause of death. But it's an authoritarian country. He is an authoritarian rule, and he sees the role of Russia to be the dominant player in much of the world. Number one, he looks at the Arctic, where there's untold resources, and with the fact that our climate is gradually warming, it's easier to get to those resources. So he is working on developing the military up here. That is a direct challenge to the United States. That's a direct challenge to Canada and also Greenland here. Okay. Number two, he has the largest nuclear fleet and the largest, most sizable military that is can be a real threat to us. And it can be a real threat to us in two places. One is over here, which works out to be over here near Alaska, where there is constant challenges. And the other place is in Western Europe, where the Russian military deliberately flies planes near ours. They bring their ships near our ships just to challenge us. So, what we've got is we've got a leader here of a country that really fell off the cliff, struggling to bring that country back. And he's choosing to use it through military means. And that then challenges the United States. And how do we respond to it? Okay, so that's country number one that we're concerned about. A lot of people believe that in the short term, Russia is our number one military challenge. Okay, number two, the second country to focus on is China. China, right here. The most populous country in the world, the fastest growing economy in the world. Their economy conceivably could be bigger than ours within the next couple of years. We'll see how the effects of the coronavirus really change all that. But they have a growing military. Now, what's happening? A growing economy. Now, what's happening because they have a growing economy, they want to protect their trade. And the issue really comes out here in the South China Sea. The South China Sea here is all these countries surround it, and all these countries are really interested in what goes in and out. The United States military is the police here. We assumed that role after World War II, and we've had it ever since. But the Chinese want to use the South China Sea as a trade route. And because it's a trade route, they believe that since they are the number one trader here, their military should be the police there. So we have the Chinese military and the US military competing in the same spot. Do we back down and let the Chinese military take over? Or do we continue to assume the policeman role that we've had for the last 70 years? That's a real question. So far, it's really confronted Barack Obama and it's confronted Donald Trump. And both of them have continued to keep our military here as an active presence. Okay? They're saying to China, we're not going to let you get away with it. Okay? What the next president will do? I have no idea. Okay, a couple of other places that I want you to look at real quickly. North Korea. North Korea is the yellow country over here. You notice that is connected to China here, and also connected to Russia right there. It is a totalitarian regime. It is the only real totalitarian regime in the world today, where the ruler, Kim Jong un, has total control over the people. Total control. And in the next section of the class, we'll talk a little bit more about that total control. Now, the only reason that we really care about North Korea, I hate to say it, is because they have nuclear weapons. And 2 years ago, they actually tested a hydrogen bomb, which is a much more powerful atomic weapon than normal atomic bombs. So they have that. They also have missiles which can carry those atomic bombs, those hydrogen bombs, close to and maybe even to the United States. So when we look at threats in the future, North Korea really stands out. Could they put a nuclear bomb on a missile and fire that and hit the United States? And most analysts believe they can. Would they do it? That's a good question. That is a good question. President Trump was so worried about it that he has met with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong un, 3 times to try to work out a peace deal. He has been unsuccessful so far. Okay? But we need to focus on that and think about what would happen if they decide to do it. Okay? Just as an aside, when they tested their hydrogen bomb, there are stories that the bomb was so powerful, it did a lot more damage than they anticipated, including taking out a missile testing site that they had built. It also apparently killed possibly up to 200 of their nuclear experts. So, one reason they haven't done anything, they haven't tested any nuclear bombs in the last couple of years, is because their testing site may well have been destroyed, and their leading thinkers in terms of nuclear weapons may have been killed in that test. So, they're trying to rebuild the program. Okay? That's North Korea. The other one that is worthy of attention is Iran. And Iran, right here in the Middle East, Iran and the United States have had historic difficulties since the 1970s. And in the 1970s, Iran held hostage a bunch of American embassy employees. And they held them for more than 400 days until Ronald Reagan got elected president, and then they released them. The United States under Jimmy Carter attempted to actually rescue those embassy employees, and that rescue attempt was a bitter failure. Ended up killing the rescuers and didn't free any of the hostages. So, since then, we've had a real problem with Iran. Iran has developed nuclear weapons, has been developing nuclear weapons. We don't believe they have succeeded. The United States launched the first computer attack against another country when in 2007 we and Israel attacked Iran's centrifuges that are responsible for helping develop and refine uranium, which is necessary for nuclear weapons. So they responded by trying to attack a nuclear plant, civilian nuclear plant in New York. They failed to do it. But we have been at a high state of tension with them ever since. Now, here's what's going on. Barack Obama, as president, said, why don't we basically just bribe them to not use nuclear weapons? He said, let's reach out. Let's try to establish relationships with them. He got Russia, Western Europe, China all to agree that Iran needs to be talked to, needs to have relationships with other countries. So he developed and negotiated through his team, his administration, a treaty with Iran where they would give up nuclear weapons for 15 years and we would give them a lot of money and we would develop trade with them. There was one flaw in that treaty. It allowed Iran to continue to fund terrorist groups. And you think of Hamas, Hezbollah as terrorist groups that Iran funds. And those groups are aimed at destroying Israel. So Iran didn't have to develop nuclear weapons, got hundreds of billions of dollars from the West, and was allowed to continue to fund terrorists. So when President Trump became president, he said this peace treaty is a waste of time. He got rid of it, he pulled out of it, instituted sanctions against Iran, and Iran has responded by starting to focus on their nuclear weapons program. They said, if we don't have that agreement, well, guess what? We're going to go back to what we were doing before Barack Obama, which is trying to develop nuclear weapons. Iran works with North Korea on missile technology. So Iran has a capability of putting a nuclear weapon on a missile and delivering it someplace. Iran has not yet, as far as we know, developed a nuclear weapon. Okay? Now, I just want to add something. Recently, we've talked about this in class, the Trump administration has negotiated peace treaties between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Israel. And the reason that that's taking place is that those countries are looking at Iran becoming resurgent, possibly having nuclear weapons, and they're saying, we don't like Iran. We'd rather be friendly with Israel than with Iran. The big country here, Saudi Arabia, is bitterly opposed to Iran. Saudi Arabia is mostly an American friend. Saudi Arabia has encouraged United Arab Emirates and Bahrain to make peace with Israel. Eventually, the hope is that Saudi Arabia and Israel will make peace as well. And it would all be an attempt to control Iran. Okay, so that's basically the situation. Those are the four countries of the world that we as Americans, the American government are deeply concerned about. And so we'll see what happens and what develop over the next several months.